Welcome to Intersecting Voices, a podcast where diverse stories collide to inspire change and amplify voices. Welcome to the second episode of Intersecting Voices. Today we're joined by Karen Docherty, a psychic medium based in Scotland. Though she's rooted in the UK, Karen travels the world sharing her gift with diverse audiences. And Karen first realized she could see spirit as a child, but didn't actively share her gift until she formally studied mediumship and began practicing. Her gift runs through generations of her family, and now alongside her son, she's built a development program called Genuine Evidential Mediumship to guide others walking this path. In this episode, we are talking to Karen about intuition and mediumship, but also about mental health and its link to spirituality. Hi, Karen. Welcome to
Thank
Intersecting
you.
Voices.
Yeah, it's lovely to be here.
So I've been counting the days to this episode, to this recording. As I was mentioning to you before that I've watched all your, so in your website, you've got all the different appearances to podcasts that you've been invited to. And I watched them all as I was preparing for today's episode. And I thought it was so interesting. I know that probably our listeners haven't seen them. I would encourage them to go to your website. I'll put the link in the episode. But just, I guess, for their interest, I know your story already, but for our listeners, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about what's your experience with the spirit world and how it began.
Yeah, well, firstly, thank you for listening to all of the podcasts so far. These podcasts, like this one today, I find are just really important for kind of sharing things with people and really hoping that it helps people and reaches people. So I really appreciate that. When I was a child, like you kind of said in the introduction, I used to feel spirit around me and see them. And I never knew that it was spirit. I didn't call it spirit. I just knew that there were people from the other place or the other world. And for me, it felt normal. So then I wasn't frightened of it. It wasn't something that I felt I had to talk about all the time. But I did mention it to my grandmother, to my mother, when certain things happened or when I seen things. And my grandmother was the one who used to say, oh, don't worry about that. The dead won't harm you. She always used to say the same things to me and kind of made it very calming for me, or just very natural in that aspect. And as I grew older, my grandmother did tell me, that she knew that I always had spirit with me, and she was mediumistic as well throughout her life. But she didn't work as a medium. She didn't take it that way. But she used to say things and have premonitions and things like that. So I know it came from a background of her. But growing up, it certainly started to become more overwhelming in my teens, where I would pick things up for people, pick information up, hear voices. I would just be out with friends as any teenager would be, and I would suddenly pick up their grandmother or their mother or whoever they had in the spirit world. So it started to become a little bit overwhelming. And at that point, I did start to question, what is this? Like this, no one else seems to get this. It's only me that seems to get this. And then I started to look into it. And of course, the way that spirit works and mediumship works is when it's the right time in your life, you will develop it. Because a lot of mediums that you may speak with will tell you, oh, I knew that as a child, but I didn't do anything about it. But I really do find that your human life, your existence here, your physical life, it has to work in tandem. It has to come at the right point in your learning and your life situation. And that's what happened with me.
So when a couple of questions there actually, when you say that as a teenager you were getting all these messages, well, firstly, that must have been quite overwhelming, because as a teenager you're trying to develop as an adult in this world, and you have that distraction that no one else seems to have. But how did you know at that point that what you were picking up were spirit? how did you know that, you know, if you were picking up someone's grandma, a friend's grandma, how did you know that? Did you talk to your friends just to confirm that that was the case, or?
Yes, I did. I used to just, because it felt natural to me, it just used to come out. So I would maybe just say to them, oh, that, your grandmother's standing beside you and she's saying X, Y, and Z, and they would be able to verify that. I didn't do it all the time because I felt like, some people could understand it or they'd be open to it and other people wouldn't. But it was overwhelming in the sense of hearing the voices. And I used to hear spirit a lot when they weren't trying to communicate, meaning when I go to bed at night time, I would hear lots of people speaking all at once, like maybe 100 voices. That's how it felt, speaking all at once and speaking over each other. And I just knew that I was tapping into something, but I couldn't make sense of it because it wasn't to give someone a message. It wasn't to pass it on to someone. It was just for me to hear. And so that's the part of it that started to become overwhelming. And I felt at that point, I'm going to have to speak to someone about this because I don't want to close my eyes at night now because I know I'm going to hear all of these voices and I don't know what I'm supposed to do with it. And I think as a teenager, you're already going through hormone changes, life changes, trying to make decisions. And I did feel like I was quite lonely in that time in my life, even though I had a great family and I was very much supported and surrounded by good people. I just felt lonely though, because I felt like nobody else gets this, like who am I supposed to talk to about this if I bring it up to my parents or my sisters, or they're just like, oh yeah, that's just Karen being strange again, like it was all like a little bit of a running joke. And they didn't mean it in an offensive way. It's just they didn't know what it was either. So you do, you did feel lonely. I felt lonely at that point in time until I decided I need to go and talk to someone. I need to go and talk to a medium.
And I guess back then as well, just thinking about me when I was younger, internet wasn't such a big thing. So it's not
Mhm.
like you could actually look and connect with people that were going through things like you were back at the time. And I recognize, how lonely it is to be experiencing something that other people don't understand, even with the best interest in mind. Sometimes they would make comments that are funny, but they are more isolating, I suppose. Like the one that you shared, I've heard lots of those in my life as
Mhm.
well.
Mhm.
So one thing that I want to go a bit deeper in is like when you say hear and see, I had the impression that hearing a spirit meant, hearing like I hear a human being. Um, Seeing a spirit meant, seeing them like I see you now. And I'm starting to think that maybe that's not exactly how you hear or see spirits. And I just wanted to ask you a little bit more about that.
Yeah, of course. And you're right. It is different, but it can be that too. It can be that you can see them with what I say is your physical eyes. You can hear them with your physical ears. But more often than not, it's with your, what I call spirit eyes and spirit ears. And it's just, it comes in more like a thought. Like when I hear spirit talking to me, they're talking in my mind, if that makes sense. They're talking in my head so that I can hear them and I can hear their own voices, I can hear their accent, I can, hear all of that, their words, everything, but it's not outside of me, it's inside. And when you start to develop your mediumship and when you get to know that this is how mediumship works and you accept it, then you understand it's very real. I think before that, if you don't know what it is, it can feel like your own thoughts or it can feel like your imagination. Your imagination comes into it a lot. And the only way to kind of differentiate that is really to develop that mediumistic part of you so that you know that it's your mediumship.
So I want to share something with you about my experience. I seem to be now in this process of spiritual awakening. And what you said just now about some things that feel like they were in my imagination. But it was a lot of synchronicities, signs, and seeing things. And I didn't believe in life after death. Like 3 years ago, all my life I was fine with that. But after So 3 years ago, I had a big traumatic moment, made of several traumatic events. So it's almost like I completely broke down at that point. But, it's not like you can just retreat and, heal your wounds. I was still a mother for a young child. So I still had to show up while I was in this really the lowest time in my life. And so I started, and it happened, and this is the annoying part. I have a mind that needs logic. I need to be able to justify things and explain them. And a lot of these things you can't, because if you try hard enough, you will find a physical explanation to it. You can justify it as something from the physical world. So it was really hard for me, except that, at that point, it's almost like I wasn't given a choice by the spirit world. It just came for me, like straight on. And basically, it was between sleeping and awakening. That's when I see them. And so I felt like people tell me that's just a dream. And I was like, maybe it was, but like it can be like years and I can still remember it very vividly. I don't remember dreams like that. And it felt real, the touching me when I'm asleep, or feeling someone watching me and just waking up and then seeing them. But then obviously you wake up completely and they're not there anymore. And so for me, the way that I see them, and I actually thinking back, the first time I saw a spirit, I was 9 years old, and it was my grandma. So she passed away. She had had cancer for a long time, and she was there at home with us. I was in my parents' bed that night, and I woke up and I was alone in the bed, and I saw her. As I don't see, like I see, like I don't know how to explain this. It's so weird, but I didn't see her with my eyes, but I saw
But you
I
seen
knew
her.
there was energy there, and I knew exactly who it was, and I knew exactly what she wanted, and I knew it was my grandma saying goodbye to me. So I got up and I asked my mom, "Is grandma dead?" And she told me yes, she just died overnight, and I didn't think anything of it. I mean, it's like I wasn't afraid. It just felt really natural. I didn't doubt myself. As I grew up, that changed. I started doubting myself a lot more. The next time I saw a spirit, and this is really weird because I have no idea who that was, it was maybe in my early 20s, and I saw an actual woman like floating on top of me in my bed. And it wasn't like with my grandma, I recognized that energy. I have no idea who this woman was, and it was really frightening, but I always felt like it must have been a dream. I mean, it doesn't make sense otherwise. But then back to 3 years ago, I was trying to speak to my guides. I was feeling really low, and they said, guides exist, so I'll go and talk to them to get some guidance. And I went to sleep, and they woke me up. I have no idea if it was my guides or not, but it felt like really, really overwhelming. It's almost like I saw two of them, like again saw, because it was like I saw the energy, I felt the energy, but I didn't recognize them. And basically, I felt like they were trying to communicate with me, but it felt really overwhelming. And I didn't like it. I was like traumatized for a year after that. And they didn't come back to me. This is the thing, like when I say no, they don't try again. They respect my boundaries. And then very recently things are again good in my life. I've recovered most of from my mental health, and I was, and this is again really strange. It feels like they are training me to, like, little by little, to I don't know, embrace this gift or whatever it is that I have. But I was sleeping. I had just fallen asleep, and I suddenly found myself looking at my bedroom, but I was asleep, and I saw my bedroom, and suddenly I saw like the energy starting to appear, and I got so scared that I woke up, and I haven't seen them again. But yeah, these experiences feel, well, a bit terrifying, and then I guess it makes me doubt myself because it's not really happening like being awake and actually knowing exactly what I'm seeing. So it is really difficult to find people like you say that understand what you're going through and they're not taking advantage of you as well.
Well, the thing is, I think that people need to understand that when we go to sleep, our physical body goes to sleep. Our mind updates like a computer, right? That's what the brain does. And that's the logical side to things. But our soul is awake because our soul does not need to sleep. So automatically we are in the spirit, right, at that point. So your physical body's laying asleep, your brain's updating and catching up with everything, and your soul is free. And so what's happening when you are between the awake and the sleep stage is the way that you're feeling it. It's just that it's a little bit of astral travel. Some people call it that, but it's you. You are aware of your spiritual body. You are aware that you're not asleep. You're aware that you're thinking and that you're awake, but you can't understand it because your body is asleep. So that's why people say, "Oh, maybe it was a dream, or maybe I imagined that." But it's a very real experience, and I experience that most nights, where I'm very aware of where I am. I'm very aware that I can hear myself sleep and the breathing in my sleep. I'm very aware that sometimes I'm in a different place, a different home, a different place altogether. And once you become accustomed to that, and once you know what it is, it's not as frightening. The first few times it happened to me, I was very frightened. I used to say, I don't know where I'm going, but I know if I follow that pull that I was getting, that I'm going somewhere. And it was very frightening until I understood that's okay. Like nothing's going to happen. You're either just going to go into a deeper sleep or you're going to be aware of your surroundings, which is your spiritual self, which is okay. So I think that again, that comes through knowledge, it comes through development and an understanding that that experience is very real. And you did mention as well that, the guy, when your guides came, you'd ask them to come and then it was frightening for you or it was too much and they haven't come back. And the thing with that is the spirit world will respect us. Like you hear mediums saying all the time, oh, they're with me 24/7. I never get a break. I don't get to switch off. And that's really not true in the way that they're saying that. What's happening is they're tapping into it 24/7. If I wanted to tap into spirit 24/7, I could do that, but that would not be good for me. And it's not good for any medium to do that. You have to live in this life. You have to live in the physical world as well. So it's about knowing where your energy flows, what happens when you're making that connection, when you're not making that connection, and just understanding it on the whole. And I think that a lot of people don't understand it, so they struggle to come to terms if things happen or the thing is their imagination and it wasn't real at all, which is a shame because when spirit do communicate with us and want us to know that they are there, they will make that known, in their as best they can. And you have to remember as well, that the spirit world, it's not an easy thing for them to communicate with us in the physical. They're not physical. They're trying to reach us with their energy. So it's a very hard thing for them to do. So if people are, having visitations from their loved ones or feeling like they're connecting with their guides or they're aware of a spiritual presence, then that's been a lot of work on their part too.
That's quite interesting. Yeah, I guess, if it was so easy, they would be with us all the time.
But I say all the time, if it was as easy for them to just show up and show themselves, then we wouldn't need mediums and we wouldn't have any doubt about the spirit world because everyone would know, because every single person that crosses over would want to come and tell their loved ones that they were okay and that they're still with us and that they're still alive. So the fact that they can't do that because it's a different frequency, it's a different vibration altogether, that's why mediums are born mediums, so that we can be the in between, and bring the messages forward and kind of be that bridge.
So that makes me wonder. So what I was describing, and you've experienced maybe not the same but similar, is that something that everyone can experience, or is that just a certain type of people?
I think with the experience of the astral travel or the falling asleep and feeling like you're going somewhere, I think a lot of people have experienced that, but some people will not remember it. Some people are not interested in it, so therefore they're not, it's not at the forefront of their mind. So not everyone gets to experience that. I think if you are open to spirit and you are more open in general, then you will feel it more. It's like anything else. If you believe in something, then you're going to feel it that little bit different. And I do think that I hear a lot of mediums or a lot of people saying medium, anyone can be a medium. And I disagree with that. I think every one of us are psychic. We all have a psychic ability. That's our intuition, our sixth sense. Every one of us have that when we come here, because we come from the spirit world. We come here to have the physical life, and then we go home. And so when we come here, we still have that psychic ability, that mind to mind communication. And some people will have it to great heights, and other people just have a little bit of it. But we all have it, and we can all train it a little bit differently. We can all develop that in some way, maybe not to work as a psychic, but we can do it for ourselves and kind of tap into our own emotion, our own intuition, and get things for ourselves. So we all have that, but I don't believe that everyone's a medium or everyone can be a medium. I feel that you're born that way. It's a purpose. You're here to do that if you choose to do it, because again, if I turned around and said, I don't want to do this mediumship, then the spirit world don't hold it against me. No one holds it against me. That's a choice, because we all have a choice. But when you are a medium, it's a vocation. It's part of you. You can't help it. It's who you are, and that's the way I feel about it. Like, I don't know where I would be without it. I feel like this is exactly me.
That's yeah, that's quite important to feel like you found yourself. I know a lot of people go around their lives not really knowing who they are, and then frankly, it's taken me like almost 40 years to start to find my true self, and I still don't think I've found. I still think that I don't know every piece of me. Like the spirituality part of it is the one question mark that I still have left.
I think that, sorry to interrupt, I think that there's two sides to that, like, even though I know what my purpose is work wise and what I'm supposed to do in this world, I don't know my path. I don't know where that will take me or where it won't take me. I just know that that's my purpose. And again, though, on the flip side of that, that doesn't mean that I know everything about me, Karen, the human, because I go through the same development as everyone else. I make mistakes, I do things, I look back, I think I shouldn't have done that. Because you're a medium, you don't automatically have all the answers for yourself. And that's where it gets difficult, because you're such an emotional empath to other people, and you can pick up their situations quite easily and tap into it for them. You don't always have that for yourself. You don't get that special pass as a medium. You've still got to do the work that everyone else does.
Yeah, and I found that intrusive thoughts are a thing when it comes to you and your loved ones. And I guess I wanted to that is one of the things that I wanted to ask you. Because in one of your podcasts you mentioned that you had a car crash, a really big one, and you had been having those thoughts of, I'm going to what would I do if I crashed my car? And you thought, well, I'm being really negative. This is intrusive thoughts. And it turned out that it was actually something that was going to happen to you. And I guess, one of the things that after listening to that, I thought, well, I should be listening more to my, to my intuition. And then I found that a lot of fears came through. So it was like intrusive thoughts. And I thought, no, I don't think I can. I mean, if this is going to happen, this is awful. And I guess, when we talk about people with mental health challenges, especially anxiety, depression, and when we talk about people, neurodivergent people as well, we have a tendency to have a lot of intrusive thoughts. And I suppose what I'm asking you is, where's the line between intrusive thoughts and intuition?
Mm-hmm. And it is difficult, isn't it, to know. But when it's intuition, um, it comes from a deeper place. When it's intrusive thoughts, they're in your mind. So anxiety, fear will always lie to you, right? So when you're anxious about something, it magnifies everything. And then before you know it, you've got intrusive thoughts, and then the thoughts are getting carried away with something else. So, for instance, the car accident I had that day, on the journey up to my friend's house, these were when those thoughts were coming in. It wasn't like all of a sudden I just decided I was going to start thinking about whether I would crash the car. It was almost like they were coming and going. So it was a feeling more than a thought. So the feeling was, I don't know what I would do in that situation. What if I was trapped in the car? And then I would catch myself feeling that, and I was saying, why are you thinking that? That's crazy thing to think. That's came from nowhere. And I would dismiss that. And then I would get another feeling 5 minutes later of, but what would you do? Because if you were trapped in a place where nobody could see you, like on a country road or where there wasn't a lot of traffic, how would you get out? What would you do? And then again, I would dismiss that as an intrusive thought, and I wasn't paying attention. But when I look back, obviously then on the way back home, the accident happened exactly as I had felt. It was, I was trapped in the car and it was on a country road, and it happened the exact way. And so when I looked back, I thought, you should have been paying attention. Those were feelings, they weren't thoughts. And that's the difference, I think. When it's intrusive thoughts, you're in your head. It's all in you're in your mind, you're in your head. These thoughts are coming in thick and fast. But when it's a feeling, that's coming from your higher self, that's coming from your soul. And that's the ones that we need to kind of pay attention to. But again, that takes time to learn that, and it takes development. And there I am, being a medium for many years, working as a medium for many years, and I still dismissed those thoughts and just thought, oh, it's, because I was distracted. I was thinking what I have to do. I'm going up there. What time do I get home? And all the everyday things. So I dismissed them. And so even as a medium who knows this, I still dismiss those feelings. So it's something that, yes, we can train ourselves to pay more attention to. But what I would say is, please be aware that things that come as feelings are usually from your higher self, your soul or spirit, your guides, whatever. But your thoughts, if it's intrusive thoughts, are coming from anxiety and fear and worry, and then that magnifies everything else.
And one of the things that I'm learning, and this is really difficult for me, is I think, when it comes to life in general, and particularly to spirituality, it's about letting go of control. So I have this thing where I need to control, I need to know, I need to be able to control, not that I'm a controlling person, but the uncertainty, especially through all the trauma that I've been through, generates anxiety for me. So one of the things that I am working on is, well, if whatever has to happen will happen, and that's the end of it. If you have to die, if the worst thing is that you died, well, that will happen. And if it doesn't have to happen, it won't happen. And it's easier said than done. But I'm finding myself that if you don't do that, then you become really obsessed and you stop living your life. So if you miss an intuition, it's okay. I mean, I don't think anyone is going to punish you for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that too. And I think that sometimes we're very hard on ourselves about things. And I think if you have been through trauma, or you are someone that suffers with anxiety and needing to be hyper vigilant and keep control so that you know the outcomes of things, that comes from trauma backgrounds as well. And I think recognizing that as part of your development too. But you are right in that, what are you going to do? Like, I always say it is what it is. And I've said it for years. And I remember when before my mum passed away, I used to always say, well, Mum, it is what it is. And she would always say, oh, here's Karen with it is what it is again. And, we would just kind of have a chuckle about it. And I said, but it is, you can't do anything about things that you can't control. So you've just got to say it is what it is and surrender to it. And that was that. And after she passed away, we found her, she used to do a bit of creative writing. And my sisters and I were looking through her stuff, and she had written down in a book about her situation. She had cancer and she'd written a bit about it, obviously to vent, to get her feelings out. And she had written a part of it that said, well, it is what it is. And in brackets, she had put, as Karen always says. And I remember reading it and I remember feeling like, now I throw those words out because that's how I feel about things. I don't expect them to impact anyone. It's just a saying, but they're very powerful. And I think that impacted my mum, obviously. And I feel like if we have like a mantra, or we have something that we can stop our intrusive thoughts with, or stop trying to be in control, or learn to surrender more, whatever that may be, it will help. So another one I use is give it to God and go to sleep. If I'm worrying about something, I think, you know what, Karen, just give it to God and go to sleep. And for me, instantly, that lifts the weight. I think, no, I have a faith. I know that what will be will be. So I just have to give it up and stop being hypervigilant, because that hypervigilance comes from trauma. It doesn't come from anywhere else. So I think if you learn to develop that and give yourself, you know, I sometimes say to people, even have a vision in your mind of a stop sign. And when you start to feel that you're getting anxious, or you start to feel you're trying to control the outcome, see that stop sign in your mind, and that means stop. And you have to give yourself things like that. The mind is a very powerful tool to help us develop.
Yeah. And I also think like, you know, we only have one life here, as far as we know. If we, I guess, worry so much about what's going to happen, trying to have everything under control, when obviously life is all about letting go of control, then you're going to find that you've just wasted your life away worrying about things that you couldn't control, and missing all the things, the beautiful things in life, that is a gift for us. One of the other things I wanted to ask you was about communication. So it's quite interesting that you said something about your past, a relationship that you were in, and I've been, I guess, in an abusive relationship before, and you mentioned in a podcast that will be in your in your website, um, that you could hear your guides telling you that, you know, it's okay, you're going to leave, you're not going to be here forever. And I guess that gave you some sort of, well, I don't imagine that made things easier, but at least you had some hope that things were going to be better. And I wonder if you could explore a little bit more, I guess, that balance between having the ability to speak to the spirit, or to understand them, to potentially see or know what's going to happen, and you as a person living your life now.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I was in that marriage, when I really started to develop my mediumship, I knew that it was for a purpose. I knew that it was my life's purpose. So I had that knowing just through connection and knowing how this felt for me. But when I was in that marriage, I always felt, and I would say it was from my higher self, I wouldn't necessarily say it was from my guides, but my higher self knew that this is going to be changing. There's a reason that you're doing all this development just now, so that when you are free of this marriage, you will be able to get on with life and live your purpose. And that's something I always felt at that point. Now, back then, I was still in my marriage. I was still feeling like, oh, I want to make it work, or, you know, the kids were younger, and I wasn't thinking of leaving at that point. But I knew within me, I'm not always going to be in this. So your higher self does know things. Like, your higher self will know your path as such. But again, it's about tapping into it, and it's about listening to it. And it's like any decision that you take in your life, you know. I think that, again, people might think mediums get that knowledge. Mediums can tell what their future is, and we can't. We have a an easier connection to our higher self because we understand where we need to go to get that. We understand how to tap into that. So for that, we're very blessed that we've got that side of things. But there is no guarantees. We are still human and we still have to make choices. So for instance, if I had stayed in that marriage, even though my higher self knows that that wasn't right for me, if I chose to stay, then that's my choice. No one's going to come and save the day. No one's going to come and, make it happen for me. So it's still where we make choices. But when we make those choices and we are tapping into our higher self and our purpose and our path and know what's right for us, then that develops us as well. That's something else that we learn from. So it's all about the human experience. It didn't make it easier to leave. It didn't make it an easier situation than anyone else. It just gave me a faith that this is going to be okay, because I've always been feeling that this isn't for me. But I think most people in that kind of abusive relationship as a situation knows that it's not for them, but sometimes we don't know how to get out of it, and sometimes it's too hard, and some situations are more difficult than others, and mine was very emotionally abusive, horrendously so, that not until after it I realised, I think anyone would say the same that's been in that situation, it's once you come out of it and you've been out of it for a fair bit of time that you look back and you can't believe how low it was, or you can't believe that what was happening really, because when you're in it you're numb to it. I think you become numb to it, you're just trying to get through your days. So in that aspect, my choice wasn't any easier just because I had that knowing that I shouldn't be there. But I was very blessed, I would say, to have a strong connection to my higher self and guides and helpers, to know that I have this mediumship and I know I'm going to use it. And I never would have got to use it properly in that marriage because, number one, I was numb to a lot of things because I had to be. Number two, it was very controlling. So I wouldn't be able to go and live a life and do the work that I do now and go to different places. So I would never have got to flourish that mediumship. And for me, that purpose of mediumship is far bigger than anything else, so that's why it worked out that way for me.
So I can relate to a lot of what you said. My relationship was also emotionally abusive, controlling, and the thing is, as you said, it was only when I stopped, when I left, that I could see it for what it was. But there is so much, I guess, ignorance about coercive control that we wouldn't necessarily know the signs. And it doesn't usually start like full on. It's little by little they manipulate the situation until you find yourself surviving. And when you're surviving, you're not really thinking clearly. But I guess one of the things I feel like from all the things that have happened in my life that caused the trauma, there are situations that have made me learn something really important about myself and the world. And I wasn't really attuned to the spirit world before I had this trauma. It was like it didn't exist, or like even though when I was 9 years old this happened to me, it's a big break until almost 40 years old. And so I have heard that a lot of people who have experienced trauma have experienced then a spiritual awakening. Now, there is certain things that a brain can do to heal from trauma, like the neural pathways, creating new neural pathways that can seem like you are having visions or things like that. But I just wonder, have you, I guess, seen or acknowledged at any point that there is more people who develop this, I guess, spiritual gifts after a trauma? And why do you think that could be?
I definitely think there is a correlation there, in a way. I think that when we go through trauma, regardless of what that trauma is, we then look for answers, or we look for connection, or we look for faith, or we look for hope. And I think when you're doing that, what you're doing is opening yourself up to the spirit. Now, it doesn't matter really whether it's a religion, like a traditional religion, or whether it's spirituality or spiritualism, or whatever way you look at it, you're looking for a faith, you're looking for an anchor, you're looking for something to hook into to help get you through that trauma or to help you heal after that trauma. So in that aspect, I do feel like that's when things would open up for us. You know, if we were looking for that, then it's going to open up for us, because spirituality is open for everyone. That's different from mediumship. It's a different thing. So you can understand spirituality, you can understand the spirit world, you can understand that we all have a connection to spirit and to our higher self, because we all have that. But that's separate to mediumship. It's a totally different thing. And I think sometimes people think it's all lumped into one, and it's not. So when we're going through trauma and opening ourselves up to new things, or developing ourselves and looking at our lives and seeing what we're doing and where we're going, and we're asking for help, then each one of us can feel that link to spirit, and it can open up and develop us.
So one of the things that I experienced during that period of time was, well, I start going to mediums and psychics, and I think, potentially you as well, a lot of your clients will be people who either feel lost or they've been through trauma, and or the mental health has been affected. And I was a little bit skeptic. Well, to start with, I didn't believe it. I didn't believe it, but I was getting so many, well, unmissable signs from the spirit world that I thought maybe I need to ask. But then I knew I was very vulnerable, and I knew that someone could easily take advantage of that vulnerability. And unfortunately, some did. And one of the things that stuck with me, um, it just made me feel really frustrated, is when I was seeing that I was, the spirits are coming and they are doing this and that. I've seen them, and the fact that I tried to engage with them, and they were telling me off, saying that, well, you shouldn't talk to them, you shouldn't try to communicate with them because you're not grounded. If it was a good spirit, they wouldn't be sending you the signs, and these are bad spirits. You've got because you are low, then you're attracting bad energies, and it's almost like it was my fault. It's like, it's not that I can just click a switch and just feel well. This is a process, and if I can't seek for that kind of comfort from the spirit world, from my guides and my family on the other side, when I'm feeling low, then what's the point of it? And it just made me feel really frustrated in the way that there was something about my instinct telling me that I knew exactly who those people were, who those spirits were, but someone else who, in theory, knew more about the spirit world than I did, was telling me that I was wrong. And I was kind of voiding that instinct that I had, that intuition, and the fact that I was getting blamed for feeling low because I was attracting bad spirits. So I want to ask you this. I'll tell you what my opinion is, but I would really like to hear yours. I don't think there is badness in the spirit world. I think the badness is something essential to our ego when we are living our lives in earth. But what's your opinion? Is there badness in the spirit world?
So unfortunately, I hear a lot of this, and I think that if you're a genuine medium, and it's not that that medium or that psychic telling you that, I'm not saying that they were wrong. That's maybe their belief. That's maybe their level of understanding of spirit. But one thing I will say is, in all the years I've worked with spirit, I don't deal with bad spirits. It's not something that happens. Now, that's not to say that there's not lower vibrations. There's not, like, there is going to be high vibrational energy, there's going to be lower vibrational energy, but that still doesn't mean that they're bad spirits or evil spirits. And I think, just to verify what you were saying about when you're at your lowest point, why would it mean that you were going to attract bad spirits? Or it just doesn't make sense. That point in your life where you're low, you're going to ask your loved ones to come around you, your guides, your helpers, your spirit team, God. that's where you're going to get the comfort. So there's nothing bad about that. And anyone that's listening, if you are at a low point in your life, absolutely ask spirit to come around you. Absolutely ask for that comfort, because you will receive it. So don't be frightened of that, on the back of hearing this. For a medium or psychic to say that to you, I just find that quite shocking, to be honest, because it's just not something that would come with the territory. As you've asked about bad spirits and good spirits, what I will say is I have communicated before with people in the spirit world that maybe didn't live the best life when they were here. So maybe they had done things wrong, or they were abusive, or, there was things going on in their life that wasn't good. And sometimes I can still feel that they've not quite evolved from that. So they're still in that place where they were when they went over to spirit, and maybe they're not accepting what they did yet, or maybe they haven't come to terms with what they did yet. Now, that doesn't mean that they're bad in the spirit world, because when we go home to spirit, we are in spirit, and every spirit is pure. Like, it's when we come here and that we are conditioned in life, or things go wrong with the brain, or we're, living, let's say a child's born into an abusive situation and they grow up that way and then they continue the abuse. That's what brings the lower vibrational energy, if you like. But when we go home to the spirit world, we know where we are. We still have to choose to evolve. We still have to choose to accept things that have happened in life, so we can come to terms and heal and move forward and go up in our vibrational energy. So that's the way that I see it. But never have I dealt with an evil spirit or a bad spirit. And I think the one example that can come to mind was, I was reading for a man. He came to my studio at the time, and when he walked in, I just felt very uneasy. I didn't feel he was a good person. I felt I'm maybe going to be in a little bit of danger here. I've got to be careful. And at that point, I couldn't turn him away, because he'd booked the appointment. He knew that I was there, so I couldn't just say, "You can't come in." So at that point, I said to him, I'll just need to make a quick call. And I done it in front of him, and I phoned my dad and I said, "I've left the door open for that delivery." And right away, my dad said, "Oh, okay, so I'll be coming along to the studio." And I said, "Yeah, that's fine." And then I said to the gentleman, "Oh, my dad will be popping in with a delivery, but he'll not disturb us, because we would be in another room." And so I was just kind of making sure that there was safety there for me. And so in the reading, without obviously disclosing all of the information, which I would never do, but it did come out that there had been a lot of abuse from him. It did come out that he was actually under the influence of drugs when he was in my room, and just not a good situation at all. Now, I brought the reading to an end and asked him to leave, which he did. But for days, all I could say was I felt the energy of that for days. And I felt the energy of the spirit person that had connected with him, which was his father, who also wasn't that good a person in life. And I took maybe a week to be able to come out of that energy. But that didn't mean that father in the spirit world had attached himself to me. It didn't mean that I was having an attachment, because you hear this all the time. It didn't mean any of that. It just meant that as a medium, I can feel energy. And as a medium, I could feel the depth of that energy, and that it wasn't good energy. And so I had to then just meditate and get myself out of that energy. But I was never in any danger, I'm not saying not from the physical person, but never in any danger from the spirit world. So I think that people have just got to get a little bit more knowledge about all that, really.
So the spirit world, they can't hurt us, can they?
Not in my experience. Now, I know lots of people will say different. Lots of people will say poltergeist activity happens, which it does. Poltergeist just means mischievous spirit. It doesn't mean dangerous spirit. It just means that there's activity in someone's home, or physical activity. But I know there's lots of stories about people being injured or scratched or hurt in some way from the spirit world. I can't speak for that, because it's not something that I've ever experienced, and it's not something that I feel would come directly from spirit. I can only talk about my, experience of that, though.
We talked about how many of your clients potentially are struggling with their mental health when they come to see you. And I wonder, like, as a medium, have you ever not conveyed a message to this person from the spirit world just because you feel like it could damage their mental health, their fragile mental health?
No, because I feel that when someone comes, and if they are in a bad place in life, or they're mentally or emotionally traumatized through something, that's when they need the messages the most. Now, as a medium, I know that I'm never going to get anything that's going to make the person feel worse. I'm going to only get things that are going to help them find their direction, uplift them in some way, help them heal in some way, because mediumship is about healing someone. It's no one should ever come to a medium and go away feeling worse. Now, the only way that I could say there's an exception to that is if someone comes and they've maybe got a mental health condition. And I have had someone come before who had schizophrenia. So I knew they were medicated for it. I picked up on it the minute they came in the room, and I knew they were medicated for it, but I knew that they hadn't been taking their medication. So that came out in the reading straight away. And at that point, I did say to them, I'm not going to read for you today. And they were there because they had lost their mother, and she was there, and that came through. But I didn't feel that that was going to help at that point. I felt like this was going to make it worse because they missed their mum so much and they're still going through the grief. But until they can get themselves stabilized in the mind, this is not going to help. So I think as a medium, you do use your discretion and your feeling and what you're reading, and you should. I mean, every medium should read the person in front of them energetically, even getting into the reading for the spirit world. That's what mediums do. So I think that you can use your mediumship to kind of see, discern who needs what. But if someone comes in and they're having a severe time with their mental health, I will always decide whether in that moment is this reading going to help them.
That's quite interesting. Yeah, because they're in such a fragile state that from a personal perspective, being going to mediums and psychics, I know that some of the things that they said really affected me, and I left worse than I came in. And I know
Shouldn't
that
really happen.
not all of them were like that, by the way. I had a few that were really good and I kept going to them, but there's been a few that make me feel a lot worse. So moving on to communication. So I guess how can each person, whether medium or not, or how can we communicate with the spirit world? And I guess from my perspective, I've been investigating about this quite a lot lately. And so I found signs, how they come through, and synchronicities as well. And what was the other thing? Intuition, numbers. This is all the kind of things that is coming for me. And actually to spot oracle cards that I seem to love. It's quite interesting because I felt like it's what I was saying before. It's not black and white, so for me, it's really difficult to trust the signs, or that what I'm seeing is communication. Even some of the thoughts that come to my head, sometimes I feel, is this my thought? Or sometimes it feels like someone pushes it in front of my mind. And so I got this cards, and not that I'm an expert. I mean, I just got them like a couple of days ago, but I've been using the cards, and it's really interesting because I keep getting the exact same ones every single time that I use them. And one of the things about that I'm finding about spirit is what you're saying. They're not going to. They haven't told me anything that is not positive, something that's not going to be helpful. And I found myself this weekend, for example, I was really anxious about this project, the podcast, the blog, and so on, feeling like, I have to be perfect all the time. This is just something that, I've inherited through the years. That, I don't look, I don't sound, I don't talk like, most of the people. And they kept telling me that I just feel so much better now after all these cards, because it kept coming. It's all about being you. I mean, it was telling me, it was quite profound. You've been someone else all your life. You've been masking, so you should be creating a space for you to be able to be you. And now for the listeners to be able to be themselves, to see that, okay, I don't fit the mold, and that's okay, because not everyone fits the mold. So I guess what I'm seeing here and what I'm getting to is that kind of communication is quite difficult to, I guess, to learn it, and especially when you don't really have anyone around you, like it happened to you when you were younger, that knows about it. So what's the, I guess, advice that you would give the listeners on how to communicate with the spirit world, what things can happen, what things to keep an eye for?
I think the first thing that I would say to anyone is please know that you are spirit. You are spirit in human form. So the first thing that you need to learn is how to communicate with your higher self, how to listen to your own spirit. Because we need to understand that first before we make any connection with the spirit world, the ones that we have lost, or our guides and helpers, our spirit team. We first have to understand that we are spirit and we have that higher side to us, that side that's connected to the spirit world. And that's who we truly are. The human side of us, that portion of us that's in the human life, is just a small part. The rest of us, the other part of us, the spiritual part, is hugely powerful and hugely connected to the spirit world. So accessing that first will help anyone's development to then link with the spirit side. If you are trying to link with your loved ones, just keep talking to them. I talk to my mum every day nearly, and I don't hear her speaking back to me just because I'm a medium. I'm the same as everyone else on that front. So I still speak to her, I validate her, I let her know that we're thinking about her. I wonder what she's doing in the spirit world, but it keeps the connection going. And I would say to people to keep that going. If they want to make a connection, they will get signs. You're talking about, the signs that people talk about, numbers and feathers and coins and all of this. Yes, these signs do come from spirit. Oracle cards, tarot cards, these are all tools that we can use and we can access to guide us. But really what we are doing in that moment is, when you're laying these cards out, what you're actually doing is opening up to your higher self. And that's where the guidance is coming from, even though the cards depict something. So it's an understanding of the higher self first. And until people understand that that's who they truly are, they're not really going to get that connection that they're looking for. It's more about developing that part first.
So how do you know then the difference between your higher self and your spirit guides?
A lot of people don't know the difference, and I think that a lot of people put it down as, oh, that was my guide that told me that, or that was my guides. But really the reason that we do that is because we don't understand how powerful we are and the knowledge that we carry for ourselves. So sometimes it's easier for the brain of the human to say it was an outside energy that gave us that, like, oh, that must have been my guides because that was very profound and I'm not capable of that. I don't talk like that, or I don't think like that. So then we think it's the guides. But a lot of the time, I would probably say 90% of the time, it's coming from that very powerful higher self. If someone sits down to do some automatic handwriting, for instance, if you sit down with a book and a pen and you just start to write, before you know it, lots of writing will be going down on that paper. And people then would say, oh, that was spirit, because I don't talk like that, or that didn't come from me. I didn't even have those thoughts. And that's correct. It did come from spirit, but it came from your spirit. It came from that more powerful place that you can access. And I think if you just start to understand that, then I think a lot of people are obsessed with their guides, finding their guides. It's one of the first questions that people ask me when they come to do some development. How do I get to know my guides? And how do I get to know their name? And who are they? And that comes within your mediumship. That will unfold. You will get to know your guide, your team, who comes in and out. But firstly, get to know yourself, get to know your own spirit first.
Yeah, I never got to, in any of the sessions that I went to, I never got guides. It was always like family members.
But that's what it should be, because mediumship is evidential. I can sit and say to someone, oh, I've got your guide here, and she was a nun and lived in 1875. And what proof have you got of that? I could just be saying that, and you walk away and say, oh, yeah, the medium told me my guide was a nun from 1875. There's no evidence about that. Mediumship is evidential. The way that you will get to know your guides and your spirit team will come through your own evidence between you and them. Like my guides that I know, I mean, there's many more that I'm not going to know, but the ones that I have gotten to know over the years and developed a relationship with, all the evidence came from them to me. Between us, no one told me who they were, and it was evidence that I had to research, and all linked together and made sense, and that's how I knew it was real and it was verified. But that was my relationship with them. I didn't ever ask a medium to tell me who my guide was.
So when would you be when would your guides be communicating with you, rather? Because you say like a lot of that communication with the spirit world is actually with your higher self. So when would the guides be involved?
Your spirit team, your guides, and I say spirit team because people seem to think they've only got one guide or one main guide, but we do have a lot of different guides helping us. And they're not our family. So when our loved ones pass over, they do not become our guides. They're more like our guardians. But our guides and our helpers have been with us from birth, from when we've came here, and they come in and out at different times depending on what's needed. So it's almost like school teachers. If you're in the first year of school, you'll get a first year teacher. If you're in the fifth year, you'll get a fifth year teacher, and they'll come in and out depending on what you need. So usually, for me anyway, my guides and helpers will always come in through my work, through readings or demonstrations of mediumship. I can feel them there. And trance, I do a lot of trance mediumship personally. So when I'm going into a deeper altered state, then my guides will come through. But apart from that, really, they're in the background. They are there to guide us, to help us, to give us answers, absolutely. But for me, it's more of a soft influence. It's not your guides and helpers will never come and tell you what to do, because we have free will and we are supposed to make our own decisions. So a lot of people that come to mediums want you to tell them what to do, and they want the answers from the guides or the answers from their loved ones what to do. Mediums can't do that. They were not supposed to do that. You can't be an influence on someone's life. They have to make their decisions. So likewise, your guides and your helpers and your team are there to gently guide you, but they're not there to make decisions or tell you that you must take a certain decision.
So another thing that has come up between guides, that there's also angels that I've heard about, out with the the religious connotation. Do they exist, or what are they?
I feel they're higher vibrational energy, and so it exists. But it's a cultural thing, because some people wouldn't call them angels. Some people would have different names for them depending on their culture. So then that's the human element, right? So we call them angels, or some cultures call them angels, other cultures won't. But nevertheless, it's a higher vibrational energy. So for me, what an angel is, and I do believe in the higher vibrational energies, I feel that that's more of to help mankind, to help, bigger situations, to be around situations that need healing, to help the evolution of the world. Whereas I know that a lot of mediums will talk about angels like, well, Archangel Michael was here today, or, such like, other angels. And I think, well, that absolutely you can still touch the energy of that angel. Why not? Because they're going to come and help. But I feel like there seems to be an obsession at times about needing to know what angel came, or feeling like that angel is your guide and your guide only. And that to me doesn't make sense. It's a universal energy, therefore it's universal.
So an angel could come to you, but they are not specifically your guide. They may just have come for a period of time
To touch your
because
life,
perhaps.
to help. Yeah, to help, to heal, to touch your life, to give you energy, whatever that might be.
But is it because you see, like they have like a greater purpose as a species, as a humankind. So could it be that when they come to someone to help them through, is it because they expect this person to have an impact on I don't know, like the evolution of humankind, or? or they can just come to us?
I don't know. I feel like when it's a bigger thing like that, when it's like all guides are higher beings. Your guides are in a higher vibrational energy. So angels will come into that as well. But my view on that is that they are there to make the impact to who they need to make the impact to, if that makes sense. So let's say there's like COVID. Let's use COVID as an example, because the whole world stopped and it was horrific for a lot of people and it stopped the whole world. Do I believe that the higher vibrational energies would have tried to help move that along? Yes. That's as you know, in this world, I feel like that's what would have happened. And there was quite a big spiritual awakening through that time as well. A lot more people were turning to look for something, or standing still and realizing that there's something more than the material things and such like. So I feel like that influence comes from the higher vibrational energies.
Interesting. So I just have one last question before we move to the mentorship that you've got set up. It's about, I hear a lot more women than men being sensitive to energies, and I wonder why. That's one of the things, if you noticed as well. But also about neurodivergence, I felt like so having been diagnosed with neurodivergence just a couple of years ago, I realized that my brain potentially picks up things that other people wouldn't, neurotypical people. And I just wonder if you've seen a correlation between, that kind of attunement to the spirit world or to the energies in certain demographics.
So the men and women thing, male and female thing, I think that as a rule, I'm not saying all the time, because I know quite a few men that are mediums and that they've always been attuned to mediumship and spirit. But as a rule, yes, I think that women kind of work on their emotional senses more than men. Men are very logical. They can be quite black and white about things, and they're not really going into the emotional place. So emotion obviously comes from the soul, right? So love comes from the soul. It's a feeling. It's something you live in, that emotional sense. And so you're tapping into the soul, whereas logic comes from the brain. It's a very logical thing. That's what you do. And men tend to work more on that. Now, I'm not saying all men and I'm not saying all women, but just in general, just there is a difference, I feel. So I think that women are more sensitive to it in that case, because they're tapping into that energy. I have seen with all my events that I do, I have seen lots more men being open to it more than ever now, which is amazing to see as well. So that's a good thing too. I think with the neurodivergent stuff, I would say that, again, I'm not an expert on it, but I would say that if your brain works in certain ways that isn't the typical way, or there's other ways of it working, then you're going to access different parts of the brain. And I think that accessing that mind, like, so like it's your third eye that opens up, that's where you're getting the information from spirit. And I think that maybe sometimes if your brain kind of works in a different way, then you could be tapping into that a little bit more. So I can see why there's a correlation there, but again, it's not going to happen like that every time. I think that a spiritual awakening is a very personal thing, and I think it comes at a time in your life where you're willing to look at it and you need it, and it's all about healing.
Yeah, that's. I was wondering lately, just because I realized that. I think when you're stuck in the detail, I think that's more of the physical world, and a lot of neurodivergent people are like on the high level, and we can see, like, identify patterns and things like that. And I just wondered, it was an interesting thought that came. So just now, the last question before we wrap up is about your mentorship program. So you mentioned, like, when you were growing up, you didn't have anyone to talk about this. It was quite difficult. Well, from the understanding to the connection, I suppose, with like-minded people. And even for me, it just feels that way as well, because a lot of the times when you try to share the things that you're going through, there is a lot of people who would make you doubt about what you are feeling and perceiving, what you're experiencing. So it's really important that you've created this space for people who are in that journey. So I just wanted to ask you, what is this mentorship? So what's the structure? Who is it aimed for?
It's open to everyone. It's open to all levels of development. So some people will come because they're trying to develop themselves and understand who they are spiritually. Others will come, they want psychic skills, they want to develop their psychic skills, their mediumistic skills, and there's all different levels in that too. It's a very individual thing, which is why it's a mentorship. I mean, I'm all for like classes and workshops, and I've done them as well over the years. But the reason a mentorship meant more was because I felt like people are individuals, and mediumship's very individual for each person. It's not the same, it's unique. And we all go through similar things to get to where we're going so that we can share things like that and share experience. But it's actually a very unique thing being a medium. You've got your own way to be a medium, your own way that you're meant to work. So for me, it's about tapping into the student and understanding what do they need. They're not going to need the same as the next person. So it's a very one-to-one mentorship, you know, and I find that that's important. And I did make a decision early on in my mediumship, when the time's right, I'm going to do that, because like that, I didn't have anyone. I had mediums around me. I always followed mediums. I always went to see mediums at the local spiritualist churches, and I did speak to them, but I didn't have anyone to mentor me, and I didn't have anyone that I could continually ask questions of. Now there's the internet's more, there's a lot more information, but there's a lot of misinformation too. So again, for me, being able to work with someone who has worked this, developed this, and has a unique program to help is the way to go.
So I just had a note in your website as well about the mentorship. So I understand it's something like 3 months long, and it's online as well.
It's online and you can continue it. So the first stage would be the 3 months to see how you feel. Because another thing is, I don't expect people to be able to sign up for a year and know where they're going to be in a year's time. That's a long time and your life may change. So I just do it in bite sizes. So 3 months, and then you decide, you know, okay, you're going to continue this and we'll go to the next level and the next level, and do it that way. So although it says 3 months, that doesn't mean it's completed in 3 months. Certainly doesn't mean that someone's going to come to me and they're going to be 3 months later be a medium. It doesn't work like that either. There's no way that I know where you're going within your first minute. You know, it has to be something that you're consistent with, that you're willing to develop, and that you're going to take your time with. Because another thing I find, that we live in a very fast paced world where we want everything now. And mediumship isn't that. Mediumship is a development, it's a process, it's about understanding, it's about connecting with spirit on a deep level, and that takes time.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, even like for you, you seem to have gifts from a very young age, that a lot of people don't have, but you had to go through quite an extensive training as well to be able to. I want to say control it, but maybe control is not the word. To
Just to
be able to
understand.
understand it. Yeah.
Yeah, and my training, that when I first realized that I wanted to develop and knew that that was the road, I wanted to drink in every bit of knowledge that I could. I went to the Arthur Findlay College. I won a scholarship there. That's in London. It's a world famous college for mediumship. I won a scholarship there for 3 years. I studied. I worked hard at my development. And a lot of it made sense to me. Some of it didn't. Some of it I felt, no, that's not for me, but this part is. And it was more about getting to know my own mediumship and know where I was going with it and what felt natural to me. And so, what if you are a medium, or if you're someone that wants to develop your own skills psychically or even personally, it's about understanding that it will take the time. You will go through times where it doesn't make sense, and other times it will make sense. It's just par for the course. But if you are consistent with it and stick with it, you will get to where you need to be and what your purpose is.
So if someone is interested, whether curious to explore their spirituality or even just develop further their intuition or even their mediumistic abilities, how do they apply for this mentorship?
Just through the website. Everything's on there. There's an inquiry button on there. There's an email. So you just inquire that way. And then it is me that reads the applications. It's not someone else. I feel a connection to the person who's applying. I can read it. I understand what they need. So like that, again, it is a very one-to-one experience, not one size fits all. So yeah, just apply through the website, KarenDocherty.com, and all the information is there.
Now, just to wrap up, is there any piece of advice that you would give someone who is, I guess, navigating this spiritual awakening just now?
The biggest thing I would say is to trust and surrender. So trust that you are going through it, trust that it's going to pull you out the other side in a better place, and surrender to that and embrace that. Don't be frightened of it. Sometimes when you're going through some sort of spiritual awakening, it's quite frightening. I think as humans, we tend to like being familiar with things. So sometimes we will stay in situations that are not good for us because it's what we know, and it's better than not knowing. It's better than having to let go and not know where you're going to. But when you're going through a spiritual awakening, it can be overwhelming. It can feel quite daunting because we don't know the outcome and we can't control the outcome. But what I would say is just embrace that feeling, surrender to it, trust that there's a bigger plan for you, trust that your spirit has got you and that you will be okay.
Thank you so much, Karen, because this episode has been really valuable to me and hopefully to the listeners as well. I know there are so many people with so many questions. This is going through a spiritual awakening it's not easy, as you say. It can be quite frightening, it can be overwhelming, it can be full of doubt. So after speaking to you today, I think I'm leaving with a lot more than I came with. So thank you so much for that, for opening to share your experience, and also for your empathy as well. And for those listening, if you are navigating your own spiritual awakening or simply just trying to make sense of how you're feeling, I hope this episode offered you as much comfort as it did to me, and maybe even a little bit of clarity. So whether you believe fully or are still questioning or curious, there is always space for all of it. Thank you for joining us on Intersecting Voices. And until next time, please take care of yourselves, of your heart, your mind, and your inner voice that's trying to speak. Thank you for tuning into the Intersecting Voices podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to leave us a review on Spotify or YouTube. Your feedback helps us grow and bring you even better content. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. See you next time.